We rebranded our center slightly. We stress the focus now on the environment in our center a little bit more. And I'm also a research fellow at the Center for the Understanding of Sustainable Prosperity under the leadership of Tim Jackson at the University of Surrey. And my research focus is quite broad. I've been working on quite a lot of circular economy related projects, sustainable finance, but first and foremost, my area is actually behavior change, just as a little bit of a background. Today I will speak about a project that came about thanks to this network that Professor Ritchie and Sung initiated, and it's work in progress. So it will not be as elaborate as the previous presentation, I'm afraid, and it's also quite tough to come after that one. But I hope it still gives you an idea of what we're hoping to do, and it gives you hopefully also an idea of what we managed to do thanks to your network. So the title of today's presentation is Upcycling as a Post-Growth Approach. And we're trying to look into the potential of an international upcycling collective, not this one, but an actual collective of practitioners to grow their impact, not to grow in itself per se, but to grow their impact. And a little bit of background, I think that this cartoon nicely captures where we are at the moment, because we know that our situation is becoming increasingly bleak. However, the changes that needs to be initiated actually do not really mirror what we are doing at the moment. So there's a sense of inertia, and also, we sometimes are a bit paralyzed and don't really do anything about changing the status quo. I am sort of probably preaching to the choir here in a way, but I think it's quite important to remind ourselves that since the 1960s, there was also a very interesting article recently in the news on how much ExxonMobil actually knew. But since 50, 60 years or so, we actually know that we have to change. And we have all these conferences, on a high political level. First IPCC's assessment reports in the 1990s and so on and so forth that were published. However, there's very little top-down change. So a lot of talk, but not enough action, which is also actually why I'm really pleased that this network here includes also practitioners, so that we can have access to generate a better understanding of what's happening on the ground. Just yet another picture. I think that nicely captures again, our status quo in terms of our human behavior. We sort of prioritize our consumption of new and novel things instead of really caring about what we have. And I think, I hope that you also see that link between the upcycling network and the status quo that we are facing at the moment. One last slide that gives you hope as part of the contextualization here. I use that slide here that goes until 2020 to really show you the so-called Earth Overshoot Day, which in a nutshell presents the resource that we have available within a year, and by when we actually use them up. And as you can see from this slide, we're using our resources every year a little bit earlier. And if I can play devil's advocate for a sec, I think what we heard in the previous conversation about in the previous presentation, that we have to sort of strengthen the consumption of upcycled products. I'm not entirely sure if that's a good way forward, and I really hope that we can have a conversation about it or a discussion about that, because what is really needed in our point of view is also consuming less. So really engaging with sufficiency and engaging with a post-growth or degrowth perspective, because otherwise there is no there is no such a thing. There's no evidence at the moment that absolute decoupling is actually possible, and otherwise our carbon footprint will just maintain the same, and our resource use will continue, as the Earth Overshoot Day has demonstrated over the last decades. Okay, I said that was the last slide, but there's yet another slide that hopefully hammers down the where we are at the moment. And I really want to also stress the role of businesses in all of that. And those are some pictures that I took. The 3 pictures on the top right are pictures that I took from a documentary done by Edward Batinsky a couple of years ago called Manufactured Landscapes. And they again illustrate nicely, I think at least, the mass consumption and the system that we created, and that is hugely detrimental to our own well-being to a certain extent. And you're probably all very familiar with the picture on the bottom right, which is Rana Plaza in Bangladesh, the fabric factory collapse, where a lot of businesses didn't even know that they were producing some of their clothing. So again, just a short slide that really illustrates, in my point of view, the poor ethical practices and labor conditions that are part of a lot of supply chains nowadays. And again, I already said that I think upcycling is incredibly important, but it is not a silver bullet solution. It will not do all the job, and we have to tackle a variety of changes, and one change is really to consume more or less. So upcycling, there are even some studies that show that upcycling can be used as a more licensing mechanism. So we upcycle a little bit, so that allows us then to do other less pro-environmental things. I found that paper here yesterday, and I just wanted to include it because I felt it was really good to see that a study in our field made it even into a very prestigious journal, the Journal of Business Research. It's a very elaborate study. It's really good. I only managed to skim read it, but I think it is good because for me there's a signal of change, that there's more interest in important topics such as upcycling, circular economy, and other topics, and that they can also make it in these sort of journals. So with regards of our research, we want to explore how upcycling can operate as a tool to really disrupt conventional business practices that unfortunately lead to these sort of impacts that I just presented a moment ago, and challenge the dominant consumption culture that is given at the moment. And this sort of draws on a study that we did last year. It's currently under review in the Journal of Business Ethics, and in that paper we distinguish between the growth of impact versus the growth for impact. So what I mean by that is some businesses, they hope to grow and grow and grow and get more impact through their growth. Others, they're actually trying to grow their impact, and they do that in different ways. They do that, for instance, through reaching out to others, trying to replicate it. They see strength in numbers. And this is one mechanism, one dynamic that we want to explore also with this particular research a bit more in detail. We will focus on micro and small enterprises in our research, because our previous research and also the literature has shown that they are usually setting themselves up more as disruptors, trying to be positive deviants and initiate change and positive innovation. And there's a really interesting, actually short book, but also paper by Spinoza et al. 1997. The paper is the 2008 one, and they argue very convincingly, in my point of view, that true entrepreneurship is actually entrepreneurship that does good. And I include that short text extract here on the right, where they say the true entrepreneur is not primarily engaged in competition The true entrepreneur is involved in holding on to an anomaly and producing something that reduces a disharmony by changing the style of a disclosive space. Her main competition will not be other businesses, but the old style of life she's changing. And I hope that gives you an understanding of what we're also hoping to explore a bit further in this study. We really try to understand how this case that I will introduce in a moment a little bit more, how this case tries to tackle that disharmony. So a bit more of research background. I'm not going to talk to death about the different approaches towards degrowth, A-growth, post-growth, or green growth. If you're keen to understand a little bit more about the differences between the terminologies and the approaches, I didn't include it here, but I'm more than happy to send you a link. There was a very, very interesting debate recently, late last year in Oxford, where Jason Hickel, a proponent of degrowth, debated green growth, the pros and cons of green growth and degrowth. So I can, yeah, I would highly urge you to, I really urge you to perhaps watch that, because it's a fascinating debate. And the other approaches such as A growth, which sits somewhere between degrowth and green growth. And for this particular study, we actually look at post-growth, which, as noted here, is a worldview that sees society operating better without the demand of constant economic growth. And that again tries to challenge our current notion of we always have to grow further, we have to be bigger, we have to be better, we have to be more productive. And don't get me wrong, productivity can be good, but we also know that the productivity of most businesses only incentivize very few people within the business, mostly those at the very top. So there is inherent criticism of capitalism, if you like. So the main objectives of this study is twofold. First of all, is to really generate insights into how upcycling collectives work and how they might model good practice. And the second one is to draw conclusions about the potential of these micro initiatives that we explore to advance upcycling in the fashion sector and really shed light on the strategies to follow what I just introduced, the growth of impact instead of growth for impact. And yeah, as introduced a moment ago, we will interpret these findings through a post-growth angle. There's a very interesting book by Jackson, published in 2021 on post-growth, which is also a really good read. There's some sub-research objectives, if you like. They are, for instance, to really unpick the motivations of the members of the collective, explore the interactions. We're hoping to map these interactions as good as possible, and to really unpick the learnings from the collective and what good can be created through the collective. The collective is called the Rejewel Collective. They were founded in 2019 at the moment, and it's constantly changing, but at the moment there are 24 independent jewelers across 10 different countries, really across the world, and they label themselves as conscious fashion lovers who care about what they wear and how their actions impact the earth. The 10 countries that I just mentioned include Australia, Brazil, Denmark, here England, France, New Zealand, Russia, Scotland, Spain, and the United States of America. And they offer a number of different services, really services, but also an upcycling service where they allow people to understand how to upcycle themselves. So there's an awareness raising component to it, but also the service itself in form of workshops, etc. So in terms of methods, it will be very straightforward. This will be semi-structured interviews with these micro initiatives. So these 24 different initiatives. So far, we intend to follow a thematic exploratory analysis, and depending on what's possible, we are also hoping to conduct interviews with other key stakeholders of these 24 different initiatives. However, 24 interviews, it's already quite time consuming, so we have to be careful and we have to see what is possible. And in the future, we also intend to triangulate our results with online content and perhaps even customer interviews, which again will take more time, but we have to see what's possible. So I will stop there. I hope that suffices as sufficient as an overview of what we're hoping to achieve with this project, and we are very grateful for also the support that's provided by the network and that allowed us to design that study and to kickstart it. And more than happy to take any questions because I think that was rather quick.